Hey guys, thanks so much for joining me today. If you're new to the channel, welcome. My name is Kelly and this is my veggie garden. We are just about at the end of October and we are over the halfway point into spring in my climate. So I thought I was well and truly overdue to do a mid-spring garden tour. So today I just wanted to take you for a walk around the garden, show you what I've got growing, but also share with you some of the trials that I've faced so far this growing season. So grab a cup of tea, stick around, and I've got a lot to show you today, which I'm very excited about. For a bit of context, I live in New South Wales, Australia, and I live in a temperate climate. So we do tend to get pretty hot summers here and cold winters. Although we don't get any snow, we do just get a frost. Now, like I said, we're over the halfway point into spring and I can definitely feel it with the temperature rise over the past few days. It's going to be quite warm today. So without further ado, let's get going with the garden tour. In this area of the garden, I have some tomatoes growing, and the variety that I've got in this garden bed here is called San Marzano. Now, the San Marzano is an indeterminate variety of tomato, so it grows like a vine, which needs to be trellised, which is why I have these strings here, which are called tomahooks. I'm going to be trellising them using the tomahawk system, which I've just got clipped onto a wire running along the top connected to some star posts, and the string just runs down and is connected to my irrigation down below. As the tomato plants grow, I will keep attaching them to the string, and so far the majority of them are looking really good. I planted these out probably a few weeks ago now, and originally I did have some Roma tomatoes in this bed. I think I did mention that in a video. However, I ended up losing those plants, unfortunately, to a snap frost, which I was really upset about, but at the end of the day, there was a silver lining and I was able to plant this variety, which I was able to fit double the amount in this garden bed, which was a blessing in disguise. So in total, I think I've got about 64 San Marzano plants in this garden bed. This bed here is about 10 meters long and I've got them in 2 rows. Now they are planted quite close together at about 30 centimeters apart. Now in the grand scheme of things, yes, that is quite close for tomato plants to be planted out. Ideally, probably 60 centimeters is a good distance, but I usually plant my tomato plants close at 30 centimeters apart. And as long as I'm very thorough with the pruning, I don't tend to have any problems. So it is going to be a big job. I've got 64 tomato plants here and I've got some other varieties elsewhere in the garden. So I think I've got well and truly over 100 tomato plants this season. So it is going to be a big job pruning them. I just will have to make sure I put some time aside each day or each couple of days just to come out and check on the plants. Now, the majority of the plants here are doing really well. I did, however, lose a few of the plants. I think it may have been to bugs, but I can't be certain. They didn't exactly look the best when I planted them in, but I do have some backups just here in the pots behind me, so I will probably plant those out this afternoon. I don't tend to plant out any plants in the garden in the morning or the middle of the day. I like to wait until the afternoon. That way they have the overnight to recover from being transplanted, and I think that's worked pretty well for me the majority of the time. I've put down some diatomaceous earth around the base of each tomato plant as I have had a bug issue just in the next garden bed over with my pumpkins, which I'll explain in just a moment. Now, I do think it has helped, although like I said, I have lost a few plants to the bugs, but I think if I didn't put the diatomaceous earth down, it probably would be a lot more severe. The bugs seem to be quite bad so far this season, and we're only really at the start of the growing season. We've still got a lot longer to go. And the weather's been really odd as well. So I hope that the bug pressure decreases over the season, but I guess we'll just have to see how it goes. This area of the garden has to be one of my most favorite places because, as you can see, I'm standing underneath an archway trellis, and this year I'm growing some pumpkins in these garden beds on either side. Now, just like the previous garden bed, this does span for about 10 meters, and we've used Rio mesh to create the archway from one garden bed to the other. In the long archway trellis this year, I am growing some pumpkins, and the variety that I've got going is called Butternut Waltham. Now, I am very excited because the plants that we've got here, I actually grew from seeds that we saved from pumpkins we grew in the garden last year, which I'm really excited to see how they're going to grow over the season and see if they are a bit more acclimatized to the garden than last year's planting. Now, like I mentioned earlier, we have had a bit of a bug issue so far in the garden, particularly with our pumpkins. We've had a bug called a slater around our pumpkin plants, and I did actually lose one of the pumpkin plants. Now, although this bug is supposed to be a beneficial bug in the garden, they can still target young plants, which is why I had some damage to my pumpkin plants. Now, I wasn't quite sure what attracted them to the pumpkins in the first place. The soil was quite moist. We had a few days there where I had some rain, and I do have this space of the garden covered with some lucerne mulch, which has really kept the moisture in the soil. So I don't know if that was a contributing factor, but what I ended up doing was trialing putting down some diatomaceous earth around the stems of each of the plants, but I also sprinkled some on some of the leaves as well. Now, for the most part, I think that probably has helped to combat the situation. I am still getting a bit of bug damage, but hopefully that will ease as the plants continue to grow and they're not so young and fragile anymore. Now, you can probably see on the other side of the trellis here, there's a lot of bushy plants, and those plants are Silverbeet, and the majority of them are going to seed. On this side, I've got a variety called Fordhook Giant, and on the other side, I've got a variety called Rainbow Silverbeet, but I've also got some Beetroot there as well, and a lot of them are going to seed. Silverbeets are a biennial plant, which means that they set seed in their second year. So these Silverbeet plants I actually planted last year in spring, and they're only just going to seed now. Now, they are probably a little bit too big and they are blocking the trellis quite a lot. I don't want them to impact the pumpkin plants growing and climbing up the trellis. So I'm actually going to be trimming back these plants. I'll probably just cut them off at the base, the ones that have gone to seed, and that way they'll just start reshooting again from the base. Now, I do have other Silverbeet plants elsewhere in the garden that are going to seed, and I'll let them be, but these ones here, I don't want to interfere with the pumpkins, so I will have to trim those ones back. I've got 23 pumpkin plants in this space, and again, they are planted quite close together. The only reason why I can plant them so close is because I'm growing them vertically rather than running them along the ground. So that gives me a little bit more flexibility with how close I can have the plants. Now, one of the reasons why I really love planting my pumpkins to grow vertically is because I can plant more in a smaller space, but also usually the plants are a lot healthier and they're less susceptible to bug damage. Now, like I said, this start of the season has been a little bit tricky with the bugs so far, so I'll see how that goes as the season progresses. But I'm very excited for when this archway trellis is covered in the beautiful pumpkin greenery and there's pumpkins hanging below. I will keep you all updated as the vine progresses because it is a really pretty sight. This is the area of the garden where I've got the majority of my garlic planted, and the variety that we've got going this year is called Australian Purple. Now, this bed is 10 metres long as well. This is the last of our 10 metre long beds, but it's a bit wider. It's about 1.2 metres wide. Now, I can't quite remember how many garlics I planted. I think there may be around 250 in this garden bed. And I did a video on my garlic, probably a few weeks ago now, just saying that I was a little bit concerned about the fact that some of the bulbs may be starting to rot. Now, I don't think that's the case anymore. I think it's okay. However, I have discovered a new problem, and that is that some of my garlic is witch's brooming. Now, I've been following quite a few garlic growing pages for Australia, and I think it seems like a lot of people are having the same issue this year, and it's due to the weather. Now, if you haven't heard of what witch's brooming is with garlic, basically it's when the bulb separates into cloves and then each of those cloves starts reshooting. So it's also called secondary shooting. And you can tell by at the top of your garlic plant, you'll just see brand new little shoots coming up. Now, I haven't actually had this happen with my garlic before. Apparently, it's still absolutely fine to eat. Somebody even said that it tastes better, so I guess I will have to see. This here is an example of the witch's brooming. As you can see, all of these little shoots are secondary shoots. So you've got the main ones here, and we've got the new secondary shoots coming up in the middle. So it's fairly obvious to spot, and this is going to have to be pulled up. In fact, it feels like it's probably ready. I can feel those cloves forming. Now, at the moment, I don't know how much of my crop is affected by the witch's brooming. I don't think it is too many. Maybe I've seen 10 out of the crop, but I'll have a better indication when we harvest them this week. The only issue is that I'm not sure how long I can store the bulbs for, whether the storage amount of time will be impacted because of the witch's brooming. So I will have to see how that goes. I was actually hoping to save a lot of this garlic for planting again next year. We're hoping to plant an even bigger crop in the paddock, but of course that does depend on how long I can store this garlic for. Now, since I discovered the witch's brooming a few days ago, I have been meaning to harvest it. I don't know if I leave it a bit longer, if that would cause more of them to witch's broom. I don't know. Like I said, this is my first time experiencing this, but I think it is just about ready to harvest anyway. So that is on my list to do this week. I may even do it this afternoon or possibly tomorrow. So make sure you stay tuned for a garlic harvesting video. Hopefully I can get a lot of beautiful, delicious garlic bulbs from this harvest. And on that note, if you are enjoying this video, please make sure that you give it a like, share it around, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button as well so you can be notified when I put out more garden update videos or just showing you around the garden. In this garden bed behind me, I've got a few different things growing. Along the trellis down the middle, I've got some cucumbers. Now, I did make a video on my cucumbers at the beginning of spring. However, I did end up losing those seedlings to the snap frost, the same one that I lost my Roma tomatoes to as well. Luckily, I did have some backup plants. However, I have changed things up again a little bit, and instead of planting the one variety, I've actually got 3 different varieties down in this garden bed here now. So the varieties of cucumber that I've got going are Beit Alpha, Marketmore, and Burpless. You may also be able to tell that I've also got some onions growing in this garden bed as well, running alongside the trellis on either side. Now, this variety of onion is called Creamgold, which is a brown variety. And this particular onion is a medium day onion. So with onions, you have short day, medium day, and long day. Basically, all that means is the amount of sunlight the plants need per day in order to grow. Now, this is, like I said, this is a medium day variety and it's going okay. However, I do have a short day variety of onions growing elsewhere in the garden, and that seems to be growing a lot better. So for future, I may only be able to grow short day variety of onions in my garden, but I'll see how this Creamgold onion continues throughout the season. I do have some starting to develop nice, lovely big onions, but I also have some that are still quite small. So I will just see how that goes as the season progresses. Now, last year I did grow onion and cucumber together, and they did quite well. By the time the onion was ready, the cucumber vine had taken off, and they didn't seem to interfere with each other too much. So hopefully that will happen this season as well. This area of the garden is a bit of a rambly, jungly mess. And what I've got growing along this garden bed here is called a fig leaf gourd, also known as a chilacayote. Now, I have done a video on this before. I think it was called something along the lines of the perfect permaculture plant, because it is in fact a fantastic permaculture plant. The fig leaf gourd is a perennial vine, so it died back in the winter, and it has grown back this spring with a vengeance. All of this growth here is just from about maybe 2 months worth of growth. And as you can see, where I was walking, that is supposed to be a pathway, and the vine has taken over the pathway. Over this side of the garden here, where I've got my pumpkin garden and the garlic and cucumbers, the fig leaf gourd has also started creeping into those garden beds as well. Now, I have been meaning to come back to this side of the garden and trim this vine back because it is getting to be a bit of a snake hazard. So there are already fruits growing on the vine, which is really cool. It is so fast growing, which is another reason why it's a really good permaculture plant. But this afternoon, I think I'll probably come out here and just trim this back, keep it contained to the garden bed. Another cool name for this plant is called the 7-year melon. And that is because apparently the fruits can last for 7 years. Now, I cannot confirm or deny that. I do have some in the house that we grew on the plant last season, and I think I'll probably put some aside and cut one open periodically and see how long it does in fact last for. And I will definitely keep you all updated, because if it does in fact last for 7 years, then that is a pretty cool plant to have in your garden, in your permaculture food forest, especially in the current climate of the world today. If you can have a plant that is going to provide for you with very minimal effort, then that is a plant that you're going to want to have in your garden. Now, the fruit of this plant is actually pretty cool, and they do look like a watermelon. They actually look really pretty, and they can be mistaken for a watermelon with the green and white stripes. However, the inside is totally different than a watermelon. It is not sweet. In fact, I would probably put it in the same basket as a choco, whereas it doesn't really have a flavor. In my experience cooking it, it tends to take on the flavor of what else you're cooking. So it is a good option to bulk up your meals as well. Now, apparently you can turn it into a sweet by boiling it down. I haven't done that either. Apparently the process is quite lengthy. So if you have turned your chilacayote fig leaf gourd fruit into a sweet, please write down below. Let us know how it tasted, what the method was, because I think that would be really cool to look into. Now, the vine really does stretch all the way down to the other side of the garden. I've got a mandarin tree down there and an orange tree, and it's started creeping under the trees and right to the other side of the garden almost. It's actually pretty incredible how fast this plant grows. If you are interested in seeing more about this plant, I'll be sure to put the link below for the video that I made last season for the fig leaf gourd, the perfect permaculture plant. This is a little bit further down in the garden where we've got one of our grapevines, but as you can see, the fig leaf gourd is climbing throughout the grapevine on the fence. It well and truly is taking over the garden, so I'm going to have to keep it in check before it spreads and becomes a bit unmanageable. This grapevine here is called Crimson Seedless, and it is a red table grape variety. There are loads of grapes on the vine this year, which I am so excited about. However, I am going to have to cover the bunches of grapes, otherwise the birds and the parrots are going to get them, and then we won't get any harvest of grapes. So I'm going to have to make sure that we cover them some way so we ensure that we get a harvest. In this area of the garden, I've got another archway trellis. However, it's not as long as the other one, which is about 10 meters long. This one here is only about 3 meters long, and it's made with the same material, Rio mesh. Now, as you can see, this garden bed does look pretty full and chaotic at the moment. I've got a lot of Silverbeet down here. The variety, once again, is Fordhook Giant, and some of the leaves of this particular variety become huge. Let me see if I can pick one. This isn't even the biggest one that I've seen, but it is pretty big. That's huge. It's like a monster Silverbeet. Anyway, I like to grow lots of Silverbeet in the garden because, well, we eat it as well, but I love to feed it to the animals. It is just a great substitute feed. and it's so easy to grow. And like I said, I love letting the plants go to seed elsewhere, so I just have new plants popping up for free in the garden without any effort from me, which is amazing. Now, at the beginning of the spring season, I did plant some Rockmelon seedlings along the sides of the archway trellis. However, in a video, I did say that I had lost some either to a frost or bugs. Maybe it was a combination of both. But I've only just planted out some more seedlings just probably a few days ago. So they are looking quite small and some of them aren't looking very good. To be honest, it's been a bit of a rough start to the season, which I'm trying to not get frustrated about. It is what it is. You got to roll with the seasons, right? I've got a few different varieties of Rockmelon growing in the garden behind me. Some of them are Honeydew, Hales Jumbo. I think one is called Indian Cream, and I can't remember the fourth one. I'll have to think of it and write the name below. Now, I haven't grown Rockmelons before vertically on this. I have grown watermelons. The watermelons were a lot bigger and the vine couldn't handle the weight, so they would snap and I would have to put a sling around the melons. I'm not sure if that's going to be the case for the Rockmelons. They are a lot smaller. I guess I'll just have to see as they grow, if they grow, see how they go. And if they need support, then I'll just have to put a sling under each melon. I'm okay to do that. I was able to fit more plants in the space by growing vertically. So I'll keep you all updated whether I can successfully grow Rockmelons vertically or whether they're more suited to grow along the ground. I've also got quite a few more things growing in this garden bed at the moment. I've got a few different varieties of lettuce, some of which are going to seed. I've got this one here is a cos lettuce and it's going to seed. I've got one over there called Freckles and another one over the other side called Drunken Woman. So there's a few different varieties of lettuce. I think in total, actually, I've got about 6 different varieties of lettuce going in the garden at the moment, whether they are actively growing or going to seed. I also have some celery in this garden bed that has also gone to seed. I've got some kale behind me. The variety of kale, I can't quite remember what it is called. If I can remember, I'll write it down below in the corner of the screen. The celery that we've got is called Tall Yuha, and I've actually got several throughout the garden that I've let go to seed. Once again, I love letting plants go to seed because at the end of the day, it is easier gardening for me. I get free plants popping up everywhere in the garden, and if they're not exactly where I want them to be, then I'll just transplant them elsewhere to where I want them to grow. It's actually a really fantastic system. Down here, I've got some beetroot growing and there's 2 different varieties. One is Beetroot Detroit and the other one is Golden Detroit. Now, the Detroit is just the standard purple beetroot. However, the Golden Detroit is more of a yellow-orange color, and we actually harvested one yesterday. I did record it, but then my camera fell over. The battery came out and I lost the file, so I can't show that to you. I do have some growing elsewhere, so when they are ready to harvest, I will show you the beautiful color of the beetroot. But we harvested some yesterday and I grated it and we used it in a salad and it was beautiful. It had the traditional beetroot taste, but it was just that beautiful orange color. It was so lovely. So beetroot Golden Detroit, definitely worth growing in my book. I am going to be growing a lot more of it next year. I've also got some borage here behind me. Now, it's looking a bit worse for wear at the moment. I actually didn't plant any of those borage plants. They just popped up themselves in the garden. And they do say that when you grow borage once and let it go to flower, then you'll have borage popping up in your garden forever, which I'm okay with. It is fantastic for pollinators. In this garden bed here, I've got my other variety of onion growing. And this is a short day variety called Red Burgundy, which is a purple variety of onion. We did grow this variety last year in the garden. This was the variety that we grew alongside our cucumbers, and it did really well. I've already harvested 1 onion, and I could probably harvest some more, actually. They're coming along really nicely. As you can see, the onions are planted together in clumps, and that's because I planted all of my onion seeds for these crops in soil blocks. And I really like to do that because I can plant, 5 or 6 onion seeds in the one soil block, and as they grow, they will just kind of move apart. Really doesn't hinder the growth of the onions. I do still tend to get really lovely, decent sized onions. Last year, I harvested fantastically big onions, and planting them together in the soil blocks didn't seem to affect the size of the onion at all, which is fantastic. Now, like I said, this is a short day variety of onion, but I have noticed that it doesn't store as well as the brown varieties. So if we don't eat this fresh by the time it starts going off, I am going to have to preserve it, maybe by making caramelized onion or drying it or freezing it. I'm not really sure what I'll do yet. We do tend to eat a lot of purple onion, particularly over the summer months in salads and things like that. So I'm not sure how much I'll have left over to preserve, and if I need to preserve any, then I will work it out then. I've also got some lettuce growing in this garden bed, and this particular variety is called Drunken Woman. I just love how pretty this lettuce is with the greens and the pinky maroon colour. It is really lovely. I've got quite a few along this garden bed, and I've just been slowly picking them as we need them. However, I probably should get a wriggle on with picking the rest, because I do have some in this garden bed starting to go to seed. And of course, when the lettuce goes to seed, it does become quite bitter and not very nice tasting. So I probably should get a wriggle on with harvesting these lettuces. I've got some leek growing in this garden bed here, and the variety is called American Flag. Now, I did plant some of them too close together, which I probably should separate. However, I'm not all that fussed, so I'm just going to see how they continue to grow. I do have some, I think, starting to set seed, so I'm probably going to have to pick those. This vine here behind me is one of the passion fruit vines that we've got going in the garden at the moment, and this is the second year that we've gotten some passion fruits on the vine. However, it's the first year that we've really gotten a lot of passion fruits on the vine, so I am really excited about that. There are so many passion fruits on this vine, and it's looking okay. However, some of the leaves are starting to yellow. I have been feeding the plant just some Rooster Booster, some organic Rooster Booster pellets. However, I'm not quite sure what's causing the yellowing of the leaves. It is getting watered. I don't know if it's getting watered too much. So if you have any experience with passion fruit plants and why the leaves might be starting to yellow, please write down below in the comments. Because although we do have a few different passion fruit plants, this is the second year that we've had, well, this is the first year we've had a lot of fruit. So we're still kind of new with learning about the passion fruit. So I would love to hear any advice that you've got for passion fruit growing. In this area of the garden, I've got my capsicum plants. Now, this particular variety of capsicum is called California Wonder, and I actually planted these plants last year at the beginning of, well, probably last year at the end of winter, and we successfully overwintered them in the garden using a greenhouse plastic cover, and I'm hoping that we're going to get a good crop of capsicums this year, providing I protect them from the fruit fly. Now, as you can see, there is a frame over the capsicum plants, and we've got some insect netting over them. This doorway right here is open at the moment, but in summertime I am going to have to close this off because we do get fruit fly in our area. And the fruit fly love the capsicum plants. Well, they love the capsicums. Last summer, we weren't really able to harvest that many capsicums because the fruit fly were getting into the capsicums and laying eggs, and we had to get rid of a whole lot of fruit, which was pretty disappointing. So this season, I really want to make sure that we can close this area off, and so we're getting capsicums, because along with those tomatoes and the onion, I'm really hoping to make some salsa, some pasta sauces, things like that. So the capsicums really are a must in the garden. Over the winter, we had a greenhouse frame covering the capsicums, and that's how we were able to keep them in a warmer environment and overwinter them. Now, we were actually able to harvest some capsicums over the winter, which is really cool. Now, I'm not too sure how the plants are doing. They were struggling there for a little bit. However, I'm hoping that they're starting to bounce back. There are loads of capsicums and flowers on the plants. I've got about 16 capsicum plants in this area, and as you can see, I've got little strings all over the place, which I've attached to the poles up the top here. And basically the capsicum plants got so heavy from the fruit, they were starting to kind of snap the branches. So I've just attached some twine as a bit of a support system to stop the branches from snapping. I'm in one of the netted areas of my garden where I've got some more tomato plants growing, and the variety that I've got going in here is called Tommy Toe, which is a big cherry variety of tomato that is absolutely delicious. I think in total there may be around 30 or 35 plants in this space, and once again I do have them planted at around 30 centimeters apart. I'm also trellising them using the tomahooks as well. Now last year I grew tomatoes in this space over the summer, and our summers here get ridiculously hot that a lot of the plants were starting to suffer. So I did have to cover this area with some shade cloth. So there is permanent shade cloth above me, and then I've only just installed the netting at the beginning of winter when I was growing some broccoli in here. Now I decided to grow my tomatoes in here again last year because, like I said, with the capsicums we do tend to get fruit fly, but we also get a bug called a shield bug or a stink bug, and they love to attack my tomatoes as well. The Tommy Toes don't tend to get attacked as the bigger varieties, which I'll show you. I've got one growing in the next netted area, but I thought it would be a good experiment to grow them in the netted area just to see the difference in the amount of kilos I'm harvesting from these plants when they are surrounded with netting rather than out in the open. Now this variety, well, all of the varieties of tomatoes that I'm growing in the garden are heirloom varieties, so they are open pollinated, which means that they can be pollinated by the wind. They don't need to have insects coming in and pollinating them, so I am able to have them in this netted area, and we'll get tomatoes. We've actually got some of the plants starting to grow little tomatoes, and honestly, these plants have just shot up so fast since I planted them out. I was able to get them out a bit earlier than the San Marzanos because, like I said, this does have shade cloth over it, which was acting as as protection for the frost. So we were able to get these ones out a bit earlier than the other variety, which is why they are so big. They're nearly reaching the top of of this structure. So they've grown so fast. Now, as they continue to grow, I will have to come out here and be pretty strict with the pruning. I'm a little bit behind at the moment. As you can see, they are quite bushy. And these guys here, they are called suckers. I'm going to be pruning off all of the suckers, potting them up, and I will get free tomato plants. Now, if you're not familiar with how to clone your tomato plants by cutting off the suckers, I did do a video on that. It was actually one of my first videos that I filmed for YouTube. I'll make sure I pop the link in the description as well if you'd like to check that out. But I probably will be filming another video on pruning tomatoes sometime this season, so make sure you hit that subscribe button so you can be notified when that video goes live as well. I've also got some celery in the corner here, which has gone to seed. I really do need to pull that out so I can plant some more tomato plants. I just haven't had a chance to do that, but it is really huge, and we're going to get a huge mass of new celery plants. So I'm okay with that, but I am going to pull it out probably this week or next week, and I can plant some more young Tommy Toe tomato plants. In this area of the garden, I was going to plant out some watermelon. However, it's not an overly big space. It is pretty decent, but not as big as a space as what I need for my watermelon. This particular variety is called Bush Jubilee, and it does grow those big, beautiful, stripy watermelons, which I'm very excited about. So we have recently discussed planting them out of the veggie garden in the paddock so they do have a bit more space to grow. I was a little bit worried that it may be a snake hazard, so I will plant the plants away from the garden, away from the house, in a bit of an open area, and I think I'll probably be the only one that goes out there to check on the plants and pick the watermelons, just in case there are any snakes hiding in the vines. But these guys are well and truly ready to be planted out. I can't remember how many I've got here, over 20 plants, I think, just over 20. And I've also got some extra pumpkin plants as well, the same variety, Butternut Waltham, which I'll also be planting out in the paddock as well. So it's going to be a good experiment really to see how well the plants differ from growing vertically on the trellis to how they go growing, running along the ground in the paddock. I'm in the second netted area of the garden, so it's very similar to the one that I just showed you where I've got my tomatoes growing. It is covered in shade cloth, it's surrounded with insect netting, and I've got more tomatoes growing in this space as well. The variety that I've got growing in here is once again an heirloom open pollinated variety. It is called Gross Lizzie, and it is more like the standard type of tomato that you would see in the supermarket. They can get quite decent in size and they have a beautiful flavour. So these tomatoes are probably going to be our slicing tomatoes. However, if we do have too many to eat fresh, then I'll probably put them with my paste tomatoes and use them in sauces or salsas, things like that. In this space of the garden, we've got a few different things growing, such as a few different varieties of lettuce that I've let go to seed. But the main thing here is some spring onion, which I just call an everbearing onion. It's one of my favorite things to grow in the garden, actually, because it does grow all year round and we tend to use it in the kitchen a lot. But also it is really easy to clone your plants simply by digging them up and dividing them, and you've got new plants. There are a few different varieties of lettuce that I've got in this garden bed going to seed. Some of them are Amish Deer and Drunken. There is a darker leaf lettuce here, which I can't quite remember the name of the lettuce, but it does look very pretty, so I don't mind having it in the garden. Now, I'm very excited to have all of these lettuces go to seed, so I have new lettuce popping up with each season. I'm not sure what the plans are for this garden bed for the rest of the season. I do have some more zucchini, which I may plant out. I'll probably just see how the season progresses, and I may just tend to leave it as spring onions, or I might plant something else in there. I'll just have to see how I am feeling as the season goes on. I've got two small archways here in between the two netted areas, and I've just planted out some more Rockmelon seedlings here. Now, I'm not sure how they're going to go, growing vertically just like in the other space, but I hope they're going to be okay. I was tossing up between growing beans here or more Rockmelons, but I went with more Rockmelons. If they don't make it, then I can always plant some bean seeds later on in the season, but so far the seedlings are probably doing better here than they are in the other archway. So we'll see how they go as the season goes on. But that's all for today, guys. I hope you all really enjoyed this mid-spring veggie garden tour. If you do have any questions or comments, please make sure you write them down below, as I will always read the comments and get back to you as well. If you haven't already, please make sure you hit that like button, share the video around, and subscribe to my channel, as that's going to help my channel to grow so I can reach more people and encourage people to start growing their own garden and start growing their own food. Well, I hope you can get out into your gardens today to enjoy this beautiful sunshine, and I will see you all on the next one. See ya!